feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast coming at you. What is it? Wednesday morning. It's October 4th, and we are about 24 hours away from the Wolves playing their first of two preseason games in Abu Dhabi. And Jace, I know that because I saw this video of Rudy Gobert on a camel this morning while I was scrolling the Timberwolves Instagram page.
Is that COO Ryan Tanke attached to him behind? Is that what I got there?
I couldn't tell if it was COO Ryan Tanke or Chief Shooting Specialist Matt Ryan behind him.
Yeah, that could also be. Sure.
It's definitely a white dude.
Yeah. I thought it was maybe Ryan Tanke, but I don't know. But anyway.
It could be. I tried to zoom,
I know it's hard to get a distinct view, but yes. Rudy Gobert's on a camel. That's like the best evidence we have that they are indeed in Abu Dhabi.
They are two games. Thursday morning they play. Saturday morning they play. Obviously, you'll be writing about it. I'll be talking about those games as they come. We're just trying to hit on a bunch of different training camp topics here. Chris and I kind of talked about what he'd been writing about with maturity, and it just feels like we have this like laundry list of like kind of subtopics. With the Wolves this year, Britt and I kind of went into the whole Cat and Gobert bigs and how to navigate all that sort of stuff. I think one pretty important subplot here for us is the Jaden McDaniels extension or lack thereof thus far. I think Devin Vassell signing earlier this week and his extension, same class, all that kind of, and for how big that number was,
right,
got a lot of people thinking about like, what the hell, like what's going on with Jaden? And then also, wow, this is going to be really expensive, which kind of just opens up a Pandora's box of all these different Wolves things and connections to the cap and all of that. But just, I guess in general, when you saw that Devin Vassell number, 5 years, 135,
146,
what did that make?
Right?
Well, it was 146, but then like Bobby Marks tweeted out that like 11 million of it is incentive stuff. So,
okay.
And it isn't like the cap, you know how like Woj does that, the agent does that.
The most agent friendly deal. Here's the most it could ever possibly be.
Yes.
And then
but for
a lot of times
purposes,
the clarification, yes. Yeah. The clarification you ever get is like likely incentives or unlikely incentives.
And they were unlikely. Right. And so it doesn't count against the cap. And honestly, like when I saw 146 and you round up, I go into my head, I'm like, okay, 150, that's
30 per
pop, like, so it's a little bit less than that. And I think, I don't know, at least we would agree that Jaden is going to get more than Devin Vassell. I think some people would say kind of significantly more than Devin Vassell. It's just, we talked about it during the summertime. This is going to be a big number that comes through for Jaden. I would say over 150 almost for sure.
Yeah, I would have to think that the Timberwolves probably hated that coming out. I mean, as much as anything, because like what did you see as not even like, people with the Spurs or anything, but just general like NBA fan reaction? What was the general reaction to Devin Vassell's contract?
Oh, like way overpaid. But it's the same thing as like it's the Spurs and it's the Wolves, like two teams that people aren't like Vassell's good.
Yeah, but he's not recognized as like Jaden good. Like he's not. I don't think he is. I think he's a nice player too. Like if he had started last year when they had Vassell, like the Spurs obviously beat the Wolves 2 out of 3 times, but it was like hard to deny that he's a really good player. But when you haven't contributed to,
so you think Jaden has more clout than him, like significantly?
Yeah, I think so. Just in the fact that Jaden has been on winning teams.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Devin Vassell has not contributed anything to winning yet.
I'm just always concerned that it's the proximity that I'm in, and so
I get that. I agree with you, but at the same time, you just hear Jaden's name brought up more across a national landscape than you hear Devin Vassell. I mean, and Devin Vassell missed time at the second half of last year and whatnot, but like you don't hear NBA players being like, and Devin Vassell's a problem too. That's a guy who doesn't get talked about enough. So I definitely think Jaden's in a different class, but I also think like it's possible. Like I don't want to down Devin Vassell. I think he's a nice player. I wouldn't have given him that much money just as like somebody where it's like, we've seen on a bad team you can produce. And I do think he's a nice player who will help this team produce at a winning level when they get there, with Wembanyama and whatnot. So, like, I understand the Spurs projection. I don't necessarily think that's what's been earned. I think that's what they think is going to come. I think they think he will earn it. But I don't think it's unfair to say that right now that's an overpay. And does somebody else's overpay have to mean then that now everybody else has to get overpaid to their extent as well? So like, I don't see any way that Jaden walks away with less than Devin Vassell. I mean, there's no way that, him and his agent like accept less than that. But, if it's like 5 for 140 and you're like, oh, that's barely more than Devin Vassell. And I think if you're the Timberwolves, you'd be like, well, we can't just massively go over Devin Vassell's number. Because,
right. Well, and the Vassell number was like, it was funky where they like front loaded it. Right. The first year is like 21 million. And then I think the fourth of the 5 years is like significantly less than that. And that happens to be the year where his max extension would kick in, right? It's like 4 years down the line. So
right, because they can front load now because who else are they paying?
Exactly. So like the more I like looked into this, one, it wasn't actually 146. Like 2, it wasn't the actual numbers. 3, the Spurs have cap space. The Wolves don't even have tax space. Like these are literally like different economic environments. I do think the relevant part of it is it's kind of like a 17% of the cap is what the Vassell number is. And that's what the Bridges number was, is a couple caps ago. Right. So, but this is like the 2023 version of the Mikal Bridges contract. And we've always said, that's maybe what the Jaden one is. We got to keep in mind that Bridges contract became a really good value because he continued to grow and progress in the 2 years that followed it. But when we say the Bridges number, which has been thrown out a million different times with Jaden, that is the Vassell number in terms of a percentage of the cap. 5 years, 135. And I've always said I think he'll get more than the Bridges number because that Bridges deal turned out to be an awesome deal for the Suns.
Yeah, and that's where I think right now, what number would you guess? I think if he came in at 5 for 150, I'd be like, at the beginning of the offseason, that's about the peak of what I would have said. And now that's where I almost feel like that sounds pretty close to right.
So you could chime in on this too. Like people aren't talking to us about this right now.
Correct.
Like this is the time where
yes.
So
because it doesn't benefit anybody to do that.
Right. So I'm not going off of anything.
Me neither.
I've heard anytime recently. I do think it's going to be a bigger number than that. And that's me just kind of reading the econ of it, right? More so than it is of things I've heard. I think it doesn't have to happen right now. It can happen in a year. And if you're
major thing I like to talk about is that it's not the end of the world if it doesn't happen right now.
Exactly.
I think
for both
fans
sides,
are like,
we
want to get
right?
this done. Correct. 100%. Yeah. If I'm Jaden, I'm no problem just like playing out another year, knowing that seeing the trajectory that I've been on and I'm believing in what I've been doing as a player, like probably thinking my number is going to get higher. And for the Wolves, it makes sense too. Like, I don't think there should be any type of rush for this. And I don't get the sense there really is, so like, I think with fans, when you see like an extension not happening and you've probably been waiting for this ever since Ant signed his, like, well, when's Jaden signing his and thinking that it's going to happen any day now, like there's no need. So like Tim Connolly said it at media day and it sounded like something that was like, just, you would say, but like there is quote unquote, like no gun to our head here. And that's true. There's nothing to that effect.
I have that Tim clip. Let's play that here.
Optimistic you might be able to get something done with Jaden by the start of the season.
Yeah, certainly. I think we want to be an organization that rewards our players. I'm super proud of Jaden's development, both as a player and person. So we've had some really constructive conversation with his agents, and fingers crossed we get something done. The cool thing about any extensions talk is they're completely positive. You're a year ahead of it, so there's no gun to our head. But we had our druthers. We'd like to get something done sooner rather than later.
So I think it's more, the way I'm thinking about it, like, is more on the Jaden side. I think like if I'm Jaden and Jaden's agent, why would I take the Vassell money or even like 150, right? Like you run a little bit of risk of injury during the season, but it's like, knock on wood. Like even if Jaden like tears his ACL this season, he's still going to get a big contract. He's 23 years old. Like guys come back from ACLs, Achilles, everything, So I just, I would get from the agency side if you were just like, why would we take anything that's not close to like 200 right now, and then wait a year? This is the same thing, same agency they did with Jaden, or not with Jaden, with DeAndre Ayton. And I get the Wolves not being like, yeah, like sight unseen, let's go 5-200,
Yeah, right.
So it's, again, I've said this a million different times. I just feel like it's reiterating after this we're 14 days away from the or 19 days away from the deadline. It's October 23rd. I think it's worth reiterating again that this is where it's kind of at right now. Vassell is another important like marker, I think, in that, though it deserves the context that you kind of laid out there.
It is amazing that like what Vassell's number settled in at, like that's kind of like the middle class. Like it's an upper middle class for sure.
Yeah,
like
right.
it's people living in, like Edina, but it's not like the middle. It's not like the richest people in the world. It's just like your average Edina family home. Like that's where Devin Vassell settled in. Like, yeah, they're super rich, but not like the richest person
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of what that number is now. What the number that used to be like the max is now like that kind of number.
And the really rich neighborhoods from that class are Ant, who signed the full max for 25%. Tyrese Halliburton signed the full 25%. LaMelo Ball signed the full 25%. I thought Desmond Bane did, but I looked it up.
It's not quite that.
It's 24, at least on
okay.
Spotrac. I thought, again, now all these things are getting like the tweet ends up saying a different number than it actually is. Ant, Halliburton, and Ball all have if they make All NBA this season, they get the boost to 30%. But that's kind of like if Bane's 24% and Vassell's 17, to me, like in between those two makes sense to me. Like 20% over average annual value, like 33 a year for Jaden. Economically, I think that is where you could land now. But I ultimately think it makes sense to wait a year, which I've said about 100 times over the course of the summer.
So 20% lands at 33 a year, roughly.
Yes, that would be. I mean, it's got the annual escalators. We also don't know exactly what the cap is yet.
Right,
I mean,
right.
the cap should be. Let me just. I wrote that down yesterday. 150 to 20%, 30. That's 30 exactly. Yeah, if the cap goes up.
Okay. Wait. So 20% is 30 exactly.
Yes. That would be the starting point is 30.
Yes,
and then it'd be like 34, 33, 36, 39, 42, something like that.
Right. So it would probably come out to like the 170 range.
That's what I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be my best guess. All right, we'll keep moving on, but gonna let you all know that we are, as always, sponsored by Falling Knife Brewing Company. We have the Wolves Fest, or Falling Knife is having Wolves Fest on October 14th, not this Saturday, but the next Saturday. Sounds like there's a million different Wolves live events going on. I know John's doing one the night before, and the CND and Crunch Wears No Pants pods are doing one the night before that. We'll be the last one for you guys on Saturday. Come out to Falling Knife. We're gonna hang out. There's also a game that night against the Knicks, so come about 4:00. And Britt and I will do a pod at 5, and then at 6:30 the Wolves play the Knicks. We'll have a bunch of giveaways and all those sort of things. We love Falling Knife as an option to be a place to go watch all the games throughout the course of the season. But this is always fun at the beginning of the year to get everyone together and to be able to actually watch a preseason game together. So Falling Knife, October 14th, come out at like 4:00. Wear Wolves gear. Let's get weird. Okay, Chase, moving on. Do you want to do Conley next? Or do you want to do the playoffs thing?
Let's do the playoffs thing. Let's start bigger.
So what the playoffs thing is
from me and
Jace's emailing is that was the word right out of media day is a successful season is we have to win a playoff series, and always those are a little like queued up, right? Like it's right. They're always kind of a high bar. I understand why that would be the goal of this team this season. 2 years in a row they got bounced in the first round. They're heavily invested in this roster. Ant is improving. You would like to see your result improve. I'm just thinking about it is going to the second round means you are a top 8 team in the NBA, right? You know, you're the 4th in the West. There's 4 teams going to the second round in the East as well. And I do think the Wolves could get to that point during the regular season of us being like, yeah, they probably feel like a top 10 team in the league right now, maybe a little bit higher than that. It just it's for what the perception is nationally. 44.5 wins is what DraftKings has them at, which I think has actually gone up. The other teams that are in that range are the Thunder, the Knicks, the Pelicans, the Kings, the Mavs are at 45. I mean, do those teams have going to the second round expectations? I mean, maybe some of them do. The Thunder don't, right? Like, do the Kings or Knicks like tear it down if they don't go to the second round? Like, I don't know. Maybe.
Well,
do you get what I'm getting at though? Like,
I get what you're getting at, but I would say it's a little different in that, like, the Kings, like, you just look at and I think it'd be different for the Wolves too. Like, and I'm not saying it's a teardown, but I do think that when you have Rudy Gobert is like 31, Mike Conley is 36, like next month or something. So these are 2 of your 5 starters and really 2 very important players, like very important players within your current construct. Like,
sure.
If not now for those guys, like making a run at it, then it is kind of like when, like, are you really going to, like, is Mike Conley going to be out there trying out as your starting point guard and like your straw that stirs the drink when he's 38? Like, probably not. So it is a little bit of a go time. And we said this even, I think, ahead of last year, like, with the Rudy trade, like, hey, Rudy's in his prime now. It's kind of time to win now. I definitely think that's true this year. So I do think, like, if you don't have expectations now, then why did you even trade for Rudy Gobert? That is kind of like where I think it's fair.
Right. And they are their internal expectations, right? And internally they made the trade, and internally they put themselves on this timeline. So naturally it's there. I guess it's like, I don't come into this season with the expectation that the Wolves, I think they'll win more than 44.5 games. Like, I like the over there. I wouldn't take the over on 0.5 rounds played in the playoffs.
Sure.
And I think that would be kind of,
you don't count the play-in because they might.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
we can pretend like they've gone over the last 2 years.
What is it going to take to position themselves to be there, right? I mean, like, you're kind of talking about being a home court team, right? So a top 4 seed in the West, right? Like,
I think that's what you're talking about too. Like, certainly you can like last year in the playoffs, they were friskier than people thought they would be. Like, and there is always, like, you can be the Warriors and be a 6 seed and find your way out of the first round. Like, you can be the Lakers, be a 7 seed. But I think, like, when like a Tim Connolly mentions that he wants to have, and he said this in the past, like, that's kind of his goal for seasons, like with teams, is to be a home court first round team, win the first round. And then he's like, and then it's matchups from there, health, whatnot. And I can understand that logic, but you want to be a top 4 team that has home court in your first round. That positions you well to get out of the first round, which is something Minnesota has not done the last 2 years. They have had to do scratch and claw in the first round to try to pull off an upset that they've been unable to do. And understandably so. It's hard to upset the top 2 seeds in the first round of the playoffs. But like, I think it's got to be something where, like, just the day-to-day is just, it has to look like a team that, with the way they look in the playoffs and their focus and their intensity and the things they bring on a daily basis, it's got to be more consistent in the regular season. This has not been a very good regular season team, especially not last year. And you can mark that off to injuries, but even like at times in the year before where, there were a lot of nights where they brought it and there was some good energy, but like, just like no matter the opponent, bring it, just have some consistency in what you're doing. You shouldn't look like a different team one night than you do the next, as often as Minnesota often does. So I just think maybe more of a professionalism, maybe that it probably all does kind of lean back into the whole maturity thing. But again, I always say this, and to me, it always is like Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels. Like, can you guys please look like the same players against Portland as you do when you're trying to lock down Paul George and Kawhi Leonard? Like, just please bring some semblance of the same intensity, focus, maybe game plan studying, all that kind of stuff. Like, bring it.
It is on the younger guys, right?
It is. It is. I really don't think Rudy Gobert is like getting up for one opponent and not the next. You know,
No, it's like for all the
kind of
things,
is who he is.
Yeah, Rudy's pretty consistent,
Right?
and it wasn't like at the level that maybe some people wanted, but I think night to night, and that's a product of having played on a really good team for many years in a row. And I liked how he kind of answered that at media day too, as he was like, "Yeah, like these are the goals. Those goals are not possible to achieve if we don't start doing that. Like we're a top 10 team in the league behavior now in training camp." I think he knows that. I think the whole group kind of knows that, given what last season was and how that went. It was consistently inconsistent last year, out of their control in some ways and in their control some ways with that just locked inness or whatever. But yeah, it if these are your aspirations, it absolutely starts now. It starts with a strong start to the season. You got to get off on the right foot in ways that they absolutely did not last season. I'm more confident in their ability to do that. Like, I think they're going to be a pretty good regular season team this year. I really do.
Yeah, I think so too. And really, if you look at it right now, like things can change throughout the preseason. Certainly, some things happened last year's preseason that you wouldn't have guessed. But like, what are their excuses for not coming out of the gate strong this year? Like, it is so much of like the roster is pretty similar. Like, yeah, there are some different role players pushed in there, like that, like your 8th, 9th guy are different, but like it's a lot of the same guys. They really liked where they finished last year. They really thought like, hey, there's a lot here, and I think they think if things broke a certain different way, they could have made a deeper run. Like, I think they feel like they have momentum. They think they've kind of figured some things out. Like this should be a time now with like this training camp trip, all this stuff. Like it sets up well for you to come up out of the gate as a unit, playing like a unit more so than some other teams, as we see like a lot of shift and turnover in rosters here. Like you guys should be more congruent, I guess, than other teams coming out of the gate, and that should lead to early success. And to me, like if they come out and they go like 7-3, 8-2 or whatever, like I haven't looked at the schedule, I don't know how feasible that is, but that would show me a major stride for this team as in terms of what it can do in the regular season. And I am a big believer that regular season success leads to like the playoffs. Like yeah, they stumbled down the stretch last year when they had nothing left to play for, but like Denver was a prime example of like,
yeah,
play great in the regular season. Be a great regular season team. Like they were the best team in the NBA through 60 games. Kind of were like, all right, we've clinched everything, and fell off at the end. But like who they were in the first 60 looked a lot like the team they were in the playoffs. And I think so many times we like to think, okay, but here in the playoffs, this team will flip a switch. Like some teams can, like Miami can. But a lot of teams, it's like you are who you were in the regular season. You are who you were. And that's true. So Minnesota, be a better team from October to April.
I think they can come out quote unquote strong without starting off 7-3 and 8-2. I think they can come out strong at 5-5 or something like that, and that would be what that would signal to me. Even if there was splitting their games, is like some of this stagger stuff with Cat and Rudy seems to make sense. You're able to have put Nas into the mix to kind of unlock the big identity. Like no major or in the switching of coverages when Cat's at the 5 or Rudy's at the 5. If that stuff looks to be the cement of that, maybe it's a little wet still, but is like laying, then I'm like, okay, that's fine if you are losing some games that you should win at the beginning of the season. But are we laying down a foundation that looks like come game 30, we're like, yeah, we know we understand how we get to our Cat Nas pairing. We understand how we play defensive coverage when just Rudy's out there without another true big. Like those are the things, because I'm with you. They got the same group, but they never did any of those things for more than like a 4 or 5 game sample. I mean, we reference Nas week all the time, which I am constantly remind people of, like, yes, that was the best time. It was 3 games. It was 3 games that all
and
worked.
Cat didn't play in one.
It was 4 games. Cat didn't play one of them. It was 3
Okay.
were all 3 of them. One of which, though, one of those 3 games, Nas literally broke his wrist and had to leave the game.
Yeah.
So it was just an extremely small sample of time, just like the playoffs was, and the things to like about that was small too. And the things to not like about any other period of the season, like you can poke reasonable excuses in that. Well, but I'm just going to be going off so much more of like, how different does this feel than last season when I'm watching the first 15 games of the year and I'm like, oh, buddy, I don't know how long this is going to take or if it's going to work to be able to iron out the ways in which these different buttons they need to push. That's why training camp's important. They didn't have that last year. Can it not feel like that on November 14th or whatever, like it did a year ago in the middle of November?
I do think, though, like if they're doing the things you're talking about, there's such a talented roster that I think they'll be winning games. Like,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Like, they can lose, and I can just still see the way they're losing and be like, okay, I think there's some good stuff there. But I just think if they're doing the things that you would like to see, and they're even as they're kind of tripping over themselves a little bit, I think they'll still find a way to win a lot of games because of their general rosters. Again, I should look more at the schedule and be like, who do they play? But
we never really know. I mean,
you're right.
Like,
early in the year, you don't know. It's you don't know who's playing. You don't know who's hurt. Like they play Miami,
Toronto, Miami, Atlanta. Those are the first
and Miami is like literally like Miami plays the night before somewhere else. So like Jimmy Butler might not play in Minnesota. So then it's like you look at that game and you're like, might lose that one, but then you might walk in and you're 8-point favorites. You know, like you just you don't know. So I understand you on that. I do think like that's where I'm even going to learn something in the preseason because especially when everybody's out there. Because it was so easy to be like, well, this is their first time ever, you know, like in that Brooklyn Nets preseason game. And it was hideous. And it was like, well, we literally just got Cat back, you know, and Rudy, and this is their first game together. That looked a lot more like the team that played the first 3 weeks than I think in the regular season than I think anybody would have expected.
Well, the first it was 5 preseason games. They win the first 4. Yep. And you're like, all right, that kind of looks good. But the 5th one was the first one where we had both Cat and Rudy, and they were playing against a small ball team that was just trying to make Cat run around even in a preseason game. And you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, it looked awful. It looked atrocious. And that's the way it did look for big chunks of that first segment of the season before Cat got hurt.
It's how it looked against the Spurs in like game 3 when the Spurs boat raced them, you know, or when the Jazz beat them in that overtime game. Like the issues that we saw in preseason were the issues that were there at the beginning of the regular season. So when you are watching these games, these Abu Dhabi games, I mean, camp's been going for a week. This is going to be a really limited picture in how much they've been able to prep, right? But it should be that group. It should be more the Brooklyn game where the whole group is playing, right? So we should be able to learn a little bit from these games, right?
I think so. I mean, I think to some degree, at least what they're trying to do, we should definitely be able to learn. I think to your point, like how well do they and do they try to, like a word we used a lot last year, like toggle the defenses when Cat's out there and when Cat and Rudy are out there, and when does Nas play? Like how much does he play with Cat? How much does he play with Rudy? Those types of things. Like I think we'll get some answers on that maybe in like the first half, or maybe in the first half of the second game. We'll see how much they play these guys together. We'll get a few answers. The interesting thing about Minnesota that I generally feel is like they lost to bad teams last year. Well, bad teams are often filled with younger guys who like to get up and down. And like, I do think that's the teams that are more likely to get a bigger team like Minnesota. I do think that's why Minnesota is a little more prone to be inconsistent because like Dallas with Luka and Kyrie, it's a pretty big ISO team. Like, I think that's always going to be a good matchup for Minnesota. Like and you're maybe see more playoff teams like that. And that's why I don't know if Minnesota is maybe better equipped to go against good teams and compete against good teams and less equipped to handle quote unquote tanking teams and more likely to trip up against those teams. Now, I think you should be able to guard against that. I think you should be able to play well enough in other areas to not let a few easy transition buckets like be your demise. But I've been interested to see like the different opponents as they go through the preseason. I think Dallas will be a good matchup for them. So I think like even if they go starters for starters, I think Minnesota could look pretty good here. But I think we'll get a lot of answers throughout the preseason as to like the questions we have about how things are going to look. Like I do think we'll start getting some answers here as early as tomorrow.
Let's move over to Mike Conley, who we talked to on Saturday at practice. He's always, Mike is kind of for us the perfect type of person to talk to while we're trying to figure anything out. But particularly when we're trying to figure anything out about like what is X, Y, or Z going to look like, and Mike knows how to answer those questions in a way that like respects the integrity of what they're trying to keep private and
I don't
what they
think
can share.
I don't think you can state this enough. Like, what is XYZ going to look like? Why is XYZ not working? Like, what can you guys do to counter ABC? Like, anything. I've said this for a while now. Like, I think Chris Finch is a great quote. I think Mike Conley is a significantly better quote. Like, the best quote of anyone on the team that I can even remember since covering the Timberwolves as far as, like, learning about the game. Like, if I'm a fan and I want to learn about basketball, like if I go to the Timberwolves YouTube page, I'm specifically going to pull up Mike Conley's interviews and like just listen to the way he explains things. Like, because I think you get a much better understanding of like why something worked, why something didn't work, other things that they could be doing when things aren't working. Like he'll answer that as well. Like, what could you be doing better against like switching defenses last year? Like he's giving great answers. Like we need to do this, this, and this. And then you see like where maybe the team is coming up short. It's very informational.
I think like last season in training camp, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the toggle, right? As you're getting the little breadcrumbs at media day and at practice and stuff like that. Like, oh, we're going to play a different type of defenses this year when Rudy's on versus Cat is on. So a lot of our questioning is we're trying to figure that out. Finch did a good, Conley wasn't there last year. Finch did a good job of explaining it. I think the hot button word, as if it was toggle last year, this year it's structure. Struggle is the combination of those two. And I think Mike helped kind of clarify that here, as you asked him straight up, is structure a crutch? So we'll play this quote from Mike.
Is structure a crutch on offense?
Structure can be a crutch sometimes, but it's necessary in certain scenarios. If guys have tendencies where they get wild with the ball and they get a little loose with the ball, it's good to have some structure to say, hey, one or two guys, y'all are able to do this. The rest of y'all, we want y'all looking to two dribbles, get off it, pass it, shoot it, whatever it is, play your role. But you got to give some freedom. You got to allow guys to be themselves. And I like that early in transition. I like it early in the flow of things. But when we get in half court, we have to have that discipline and structure there, which leads into the fourth quarters and allows us to make plays down the stretch.
So, Jace, from that media with Mike, and then when we had Micah Nori, the way I'm sort of thinking about what this structure is going to look like is, I asked Micah straight up, I was like, is this when it's structured, do you mean it's going to look like Utah, which was extremely structured when Conley and Gobert were there? And he said, no, it's like a different type of structure. It's an initial structure that then allows you to play in flow, which seems like a proper compromise for this group, right? They need some more structure, but with a lot of their personnel probably don't want to be overly structured. Though, again, this is another one at like the toggle thing last year where it's like, there's a lot of gray here. Like, how much structure do we have with this personnel grouping versus this one? And some guys overlap those groups. Like, are they going to forget that Rudy's not on the floor or that Cat's not on the floor in this sort of way? Like, I think this is another thing that's going to be hard because it's not a super like definitive amount of structure, which again is a good thing for this group. I know you think this group is probably maximized when they can get to the flow, but this is a good compromise, right?
I think basketball is maximized when you can get into like a flow. I think just seeing like Minnesota's offense when it did work in the past, which was usually when like the bench was in, being like, oh, okay, this is like basketball where it is random. It is like, okay, we're going to run pick and roll. Okay, I'm going to get off of it. We get a guy to the corner. Okay, let's set up a side screen and roll and run like a secondary pick and roll there. And now I've got to switch with the big. Yep, we're going to pop it down to him. Like, and now it's like, as a defense, you're defending like 3 actions in 20 seconds. Like somebody's going to get open. You're going to have a breakdown. There's no way you can't, or you're going to end up in a bad mismatch. So like seeing those possessions as they played out, I'm like, yes, this is the best basketball. I do understand that like it takes a lot of knowledge, and I think sometimes experience helps a lot with that too, to be able to consistently do that. I think what more often happens when you don't have what are we doing as we run down the court is like guys kind of stare at each other. There's nothing to get it started. From my understanding, like this added bit of structure is like an action to start it. It's like, okay, everybody knows what they're supposed to do in the first 5 seconds of the play, and we're going to try this. Inevitably, hey, it might work out where it leads to a bucket right away. Great. Eventually, like these different calls, the defense will know what's coming, but you've hopefully at least compromised them, and you go from there. So I do think there's still going to be some. You have to have understanding. You have to know what comes next. And on players, there has to be more. It's read and react. I think they just want to get a guy like an Ant, a guy like Cat in a read and react situation and let them go from there. Where sometimes there's too much standing, too much stalling, too much waiting around. Just to even get into anything, where now you're like really handcuffed because it's 12 seconds left or 10 seconds left and Cat's holding the ball up top. And it's like, well, everybody's watching him and it's like, nothing's going to happen here. So we're going to lead to some really forced offense. So I think ideally you never have to do that. But even Finch, I think, has said like, yeah, like even when you call plays, like there has to be some sense of what to do with like within free flow and reacting when as soon as the defense takes that thing away, which they inevitably will do. So like I think like best case scenario for a team is that everybody gets to a point where their understanding of just NBA offense and what you want and what you're trying to get to is that you don't even have to call anything to start. Like it can just be well, obviously we're going to have Rudy come up, set a screen, and we're going to go from there. And everybody else understands spacing and moving the ball, switching its sides with it, touching the paint, those types of things. Like Naz Reid has called that out before. He even did it at media day. He's like, I understand basketball. And I'm like, you do. I have no question about that. Like you very much understand NBA offense. I think ideally everybody gets there. But for now, I think just an actions to get things started where guys know where they're supposed to go, especially with the starting unit where it gets a little sticky sometimes. You know where you're supposed to go to get the play going. Everybody knows where they're supposed to start. Hopefully guys kind of continue to evolve as players from there.
Have you developed a greater appreciation for flow and what that even is and what that means since Chris Finch has been here? Because I don't think like 2 years ago, I could have like defined what that is and why it works without having talked to Finch and kind of seen when that's worked, what it looks like. Like I appreciate what that is. I appreciate the value of a free flowing offense more today than I would have 2 years ago. I feel like just having known you and talked to you, you've grown in that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Ryan Saunders, like when he talks about we don't have plays, we have concepts, and we all just kind of make fun of it almost. Like, okay, maybe we should get some plays, like because the offense looks so bad. But you do see like that probably was also a bunch of young guys.
Why I was low on it. That's a good point.
Yep. It's a bunch of young players who don't know what they're doing. And so then the offense looks like it's going nowhere fast ever. And it doesn't look like anybody knows what they're doing. But I can even point out like that game they won against the Warriors. Like I clipped a few plays from that where Naz took so many shots in so few minutes in that game, and all the possessions were like he is just going to like the right spot, spacing to the right space. So like maybe he's just an obvious kickout candidate, or he's coming and setting a random screen and roll, like, halfway through the possession to somebody who's on like the baseline, and that's leading to a really easy 2-man game in space. Like those types of things that lead to easy buckets, easy looks, and they're really hard to defend. That really do come out of nowhere. It comes like Naz seeing what's playing out and knowing I need to go here. I should go here. And just the effectiveness of that kind of offense. And frankly, like this sounds weird, but like the beauty of it, like I think those plays look awesome when they just kind of matriculate out of nothing. And I think they're the hardest to defend. I've heard like enough, we even mentioned this last year, like enough like Kobe clips and stuff where he's like, when I know it's a screen and roll up top, that is easy to defend because we know exactly what you're trying to do, where the ball is trying to go. It really is like when you can kind of pull things out of thin air to where you're not even sure as you're running down the court what you're going to do, and you kind of come up with it on the fly, that a defense then sure doesn't know what's coming. There's no scout for it. And now it's just read and react. And the offense at that point, I think, has a pretty clear advantage.
I think you mentioned Golden State. It was Naz playing against Golden State, but it triggered in my mind like
that's what
Golden State is.
Yeah, they are the child of that, right?
They are the number one flow team, and everyone doesn't think of that because they think of like the Splash Brothers and 3-point shooting and what it all is. They found a free flowing system. It's the split action thing, right? It's like enter to Looney or Draymond Green at 6 feet, and now Clay and Steph are playing off each other in that split action where there's like one of them's going to pop this way, one of them's going to be that way. It's this optionality within the offense.
None of it's predetermined from there. Yeah,
none of it is predetermined. The one thing that is predetermined is pick and roll. That is the number one greatest signal of a team that has great structure. the team that's last in pick and roll frequency for the last like 5 years is Golden State.
Right.
The Wolves I think were 26th in pick and roll frequency last season. That is not a structured team in that sort of way. And I like that style of play. I think that makes sense. But that makes sense when you have, to lean all the way into that, when you have a Golden State Warriors type of roster construction. When you have Rudy Gobert on your team and you want to implement him into this group, that's why I was saying I like flow more than I like structure. But if this is what your roster is and you're playing him 34 minutes a night, and when you're getting into the flow and his touches are now coming at like 8 feet and he's doing Euros and he's doing post-ups and stuff like that, like so long as you have Rudy Gobert, that structure volume has to go up. And if the pick and roll number is a metric to look at that as, you got to go from 26th to like 15th. Golden State can chill at like 30th because they know how to make that work. They don't really run that, the Wolves need to run more of that because of the way in which they've shaped their roster. If and when Rudy Gobert or Karl-Anthony Towns aren't on this team in 3-4 years or whatever, and it's like the Ant and Jaden window and maybe Nas is there and Leonard Miller, some other young guys, I promise you that team is going to be straight flow. Like that is how those guys, I mean, I guess depending on how they evolve, but they strike me as guys who are going to play more so in that more modern flow type of structure. But that's not the team that the Wolves have given themselves now. And so long as that's the case, in my opinion, you got to hit the structure button a little bit more.
Yeah, and that very much like that's something Chris Finch clearly realized, even dating back to the end of the playoffs last year. Like we got to have more of it. It's clearly proven that it's too hard for these guys to figure out the spacing naturally with Rudy, Ant, and Carl out there. They struggled with that anytime those guys were on the floor together. And I think that's why, like, and Finch has kind of said this, like we were like a chameleon last year. And I think that largely had to do with kind of an ever evolving roster of who's healthy, who's available, who's not. I do think it's also like identity takes longer to find when you make your roster one that doesn't fit with what you wanted to do, like schematically. Adding Rudy Gobert changed everything that they were as far as a team the year prior. And like you want to hold on to some of that stuff because it worked and it's what like fits exactly what you wanted to do as a coach and your belief system, and like your players buy into like what the coach thinks when Chris Finch first gets there and there's success, and now Rudy's here and you got to change everything, but you still want to keep the stuff that was so good even if it doesn't quite fit anymore. So I think that did lead to a little bit of an identity crisis, but now I think they've got a clearer idea of like, okay, we've got to trash a lot of that stuff, or at least scratch it, or at least put it on the back burner, and maybe we can get back to it later. I think they're starting having more data and knowledge of what they were last year, of like, even if I think Finch's quote was great, like we want to be fast, but we're slow, like basically, but we're not fast or something. And we want to play free, but this is a group that needs more structure. Like he said those two things like back to back, like this isn't like basically acknowledging like there's what our ideal is and there's what we have, and what we have requires something a little different. And I think that's kind of coaching 101. Now, should you create a roster that varies greatly from what your coach would usually do? I don't know. Like, I don't think the Warriors would do that to Steve Kerr, but that's the boat they're in now. And Finch clearly bought in when they made the trade and everything, and was all for it. And so like, now it's time. You're a year in. It's okay. It makes sense that it didn't click right away in year one, but now you know what you have. So maximize it. And I think they're all kind of uniting together on that venture here in the off season and in training camp. So I do expect a better result. I do think it needs more structure. I think that was pretty clear last year. I think everybody has bought into that now.
It was before me and Britt did like a Bigs preview. I went and watched like a handful of Rudy's like clips with France from this summer. And like that can be beautiful too. Like the structure. I mean, they are so structured, and I love how it looks at times. But I was watching that and I'm like, okay, every one of these France's best possessions is like ping, 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 based out of structure, right? There was a plan here. And I'm reminded of like Finch at Media Day 12 months ago, where he was kind of like talking about what he saw Rudy in Eurobasket with France the year before as like playing at the elbows, kind of as a passer and this and that. And that was a reason, it seemed from Finch, of like why we feel like we can put him in more of a flow-based offensive system. And it's just not how France plays. To my eye, it's so structured. And quite frankly, having watched like a lot of Eurobasket last year and World Cup this summer, they kind of like deleted a lot of what was like the Rudy kind of making decisions. Like Rudy went back to Utah Rudy for France this year as they, jacked up the structure. And, France kind of stunk in the World Cup or whatever. But it's such an interesting thing to me of what Finch thought was going to be possible right when he got here, right when Rudy got here for training camp last year, and what has had to kind of be curtailed around that and not have been the case. I just wonder sometimes if like Finch was trying to see some things in Rudy that might not have been there. And maybe that'll all be proven wrong this year, and maybe Rudy will be able to have more diversity in it. It's just for me, who's obviously has a way worse eye than Finch and has probably watched way less of it than Finch. I just don't get what film there is out there that says, yeah, he can do just as well within the flow as he can within the structure. I haven't seen it.
I think that I really do think that they've probably given up on that too. I mean, just for like all indications, I think like they're not going to come on and be like, yep, every possession, we're just going to hammer it in. Structure. I think what they've said is as far as they'll ever say, but I think everything they've said leads me to believe we're going to see a lot more structure. And they're going to be like, it's
when
just
Rudy's
a
out
starting
there.
point. Yes, correct. Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's what this whole like delineation is like, yeah, but then we're probably not going to have that much structure when it's like Ant, Jaden, Cat, Nas, J-Mac out there or whatever, like with that group, we're going to run and we're going to float. Like
I tried to ask that, I said, it's obviously a different group, but at one point I asked Finch, I said, with the reserves, do you expect less structure? And he said, yes, now what exactly qualifies as the reserves? Because, with the stagger, you always have a Cat or a Rudy out there.
And now we got the toggle and we got the stagger. Like,
yeah,
that's what I would do too. I agree with that. It's like, it's hard,
but I would say
hard.
What's interesting though is like I always want to blame this stuff on Rudy, but like structure is needed for Ant, like less ball holding. Structure is needed for Carl with less ball holding. Like
and
Carl can't
placement
get
of Carl.
Yes, 100%.
Structure for Carl will be
the
good for
spacing
placement
of it as well. Yep, like where Carl needs to be on the floor because like it's hard to understand that, and I don't think they have a clear grasp of it. Like the player sometimes of where everybody needs to be for things to work. For Ant to have proper space, for Rudy to properly function in the spot that he is on the floor, for Carl to have the most space for himself to work. So I think like the coaches say, okay, you've got to be here, here, and here, and how do we make sure you're here and here, and how do we make sure that Ant's not sizing up his defender like up top and allowing everybody to kind of suck in because there's 12 seconds on the shot clock now and we know what's going to happen. Same thing with Cat from the top of the key where he's like just kind of jab stepping for 5 seconds and you know what's going to happen and the defense can suck in. Like structure helps all of those guys. Like structure is an antidote for kind of stickiness of the basketball as well. So I think that all matters. My one thing,
it's not just a Rudy thing. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yes. And then, I think I asked Mike this, like, because the idea of free flowing, I think it was so great when like it was pretty much the bench and it looked like a lineup that couldn't win basketball games. And they beat the Knicks and they should have beat the Bulls after Ant got hurt, but Taurean Prince just threw the ball to space. And I asked Mike, I was like, how many sets did you guys run against the Knicks when you scored like 140? He's like, I think 3. Yeah, 3. Yeah. And it's just like when you have guys and you have like, it's like Mike Conley and Kyle Anderson and Taurean Prince like out there playing basketball, like they just get it, and they know where to go and where the ball should go, and what the proper play should be here, and the proper shots to take, and that just it can lead to great results. It's not going to win you a championship because you do need those elite players, but the best brand of basketball form in my mind is the team that can get the elite players to play the best brand of basketball. That's how you unlock Warriors. Winning 73 games before they even ever got Kevin Durant.
And Jace, that's the goal. That's the goal of whatever this is that Finch is describing of like a foundation of structure into flow is what you just said is getting the best players on the team to play the best brand of basketball.
Right.
Like that's what they're aiming at. And I think that is a great place to start. I don't know what else I would do. Like shouldn't just hammer home like, nope, we're switching to Utah offense and it's like 4 spread. We're doing that the whole time. And it's not like it'd be dumb to treat a game where you have Carl, Rudy, Ant, and Jaden the same way that you treated that Knicks game.
Right.
Like that doesn't make sense either,
Right.
So it's the balance. It's why we're excited to watch these preseason games tomorrow. Let's wrap this up by Jason and I during the football season when he comes on Wednesdays. We do prize picks where we.
I'm gonna do better this year.
Yeah, we did do. Well, it's funny. Like the last week, me and Kyle started, and we did our first one, and we went 0 for 4 collectively. I was 0 for 2 on both of mine, and Kyle was 0 for 2 on both of his. But it's we're doing things differently this year. We're gonna get back on track. I spent a little bit, honestly, more time thinking about this today. I'm just gonna show you. Can you see these on the screen right now?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, so I like this: Fields and Herbert to score a touchdown.
I saw that one. I considered it.
Yeah, or just Fields 1.5 passing or rushing touchdowns. Like he has to just pass or rush for 2 touchdowns for that to hit. I really liked both of those. I don't know. I threw Darnell Mooney on here because I was like, I don't remember him having done anything this season, so I don't know if I wanted him on there. And then Herbert, I really liked at 44.5. So that was my starting point of the 4 I'm thinking about. We'll each choose 2 and put them on a card here. What did you have?
Yeah, okay. And that's what's fun though, is like you pick 4 and then you see Dane's thing there. 2, it's like times 10. So if you put down 20 and 200, like it's now like obviously the more you put in there, the more likely you are to get one wrong. But like the payout can be pretty handsome if you do hit them all. Yeah, rushing yards. I went Sam Howell over 12.5 rushing yards.
I saw that one too.
Well, you better see it. It's on the top of your screen.
Yeah. Well, I said I was thinking about that one too. Okay, so I removed Mooney. We'll put that one in there. What else you got?
Howell has gone over that in every game but the Arizona game where he had 11. Like it's and he's had like 200 for 40 against Philly. Like it's now maybe they think like he won't get rushed by Chicago, so like there won't be much need to take off. But I do think he likes to do that when it's available.
Sure.
Are you doing one now, or am I just throwing?
No, I just pruned mine out. I'm gonna go with the Fields and Herbert more than 0.5 rushing or receiving touchdowns combined. I like that one. And then I'm going to say Herbert more than 44.5 rushing yards. Those are my 2. So we'll put one together that's all 4 of ours together, and I'm sure I'll be the one to mess it up.
And we'll put like 100 on it. Yeah. And
we'll retire.
Yeah, that's right. Justin Fields over an interception. It's just my favorite like one to play, especially if you're going to watch a game. Like watching the whole game, just hoping one pass gets picked. It's never dead. It's never dead as like a prop. It's not like I need a 60-yard rush here in the 4th quarter because
you almost want garbage time at the end.
Yes, and that's a really nice comfort where like I expect the Bears to lose. I expect them to late in the game have to force the ball down the field. So like even if Justin Fields plays well, it's exactly like the Denver game. He didn't have a pick. Last drive, desperation, 3rd and 13, throws a pick. Like it's a good bailout if you think the quarterback's going to lose. That's a good chance to throw late.
I like that. So this just for those of you who are watching on YouTube or just listening on the podcast, it's if we hit all 4 of these, I'm saying more than a touchdown scored by the combination of Fields and Herbert. One of the 2 of them scored a touchdown.
Fields can't be passing for there.
Yeah, not passing. That this is just would be a rushing touchdown in Fields' case. I think I like Herbert more than 44.5 rushing yards. You're taking Howell more than 12.5 rushing yards and Fields more than 0.5 interceptions. If all 4 of those hit, 10-1 on whatever. I have 20 in here right now, so that'd be 20 to win 200. I'm a little concerned about whenever we do like 4 that are all more thans. That never seems to be the
tends to be our game.
Yeah, that's true. That's why we didn't do as well last year. But anyways, that's Prize Picks is a sponsor of the show again this season, and they for listeners of the show, they will give you a $100 sign up bonus if you use the promo code Dane. And if you do There's other different ways to get a $100 sign up bonus with Prize Picks, but I would appreciate if you use the promo code Dane when you do that, because that helps us. That helps Prize Picks know where you came from. So Jason and I will be tracking how we do over the course of the year with this. It's always kind of fun. Jason and I are football nerds as well. All right, Jace, just give me, before we go, just one specific thing you are looking for in tomorrow's game.
Just rotations, just first guys off the bench. You know who the starters are going to be. It's just totally seeing, like, we have our suspicions about how it's going to play out. It's like, is Shake Milton going to come in and be the backup point guard? Is that how he's going to function? Is Jordan McLaughlin, does he play in the first half, or does he come on in the second half? I know he said he's healthy now and he wasn't before. You know, at the end of last season, he certainly didn't look healthy, didn't look explosive, those types of things. He says he's healthy now, but has he already lost the backup point guard spot? That's something I'm interested in. It's always just rotation for me to start the game, because I do think that's something that at the first quarter and a half, they probably, even as guys play lesser minutes, I think that's still the time where you can best guess what a rotation will look like when you hit the regular season.
Your 1 to 10 worry scale, 10 being really worried about the Wolves point guard depth, because mine is at like 2 now. I just see like 7 different guys who I'm like, okay, whatever, they can initiate. And I'm always in camp Ant initiate more too. Like I think we maybe like overhyped that a lot during the year. Like, oh, what's going to happen at point guard here?
That was when they had one.
Yeah.
For so much of last year, they literally just had D'Lo, and then J-Mac was out, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it was Noel who was not as
and
good
Jalen
at that
Noel
position.
is not capable of doing that.
That's what we were worried about when we're looking at. They're like, oh man, it's only 36-year-old Mike Conley. We were worried about duplicating like the Austin Rivers, Jalen Noel, Bryn Forbes as pseudo backup point guard thing, because that was really costly last season. The quality, right, of these backup lead initiators is so much higher, from Shake to Nikhil to Kyle doing some of it. And then even it's like, okay, so J-Mac is like way down here. What if J-Mac is back to healthy and looks like the pace setter and the player he was, that, you know, was just net rating god for a couple of years? Like, if that's your backstop for backup point guard, worst case scenario, like, all right, this team I think is fine on point guard depth. And I think I way overthought that this summer.
Yeah, I agree. Now, if Mike Conley goes down and now you don't have a starting point guard, like I wouldn't love any of these guys like directing that multi-big Cat, Rudy, and starting lineup. Like, I think Mike Conley is very important to that starting lineup working, maximizing itself. As far as like running minutes behind him, I 1000% agree with you. Shake Milton can do it just fine. It might not be like his natural thing to be like a point guard. It doesn't have to be in a second unit. A lot of second units don't have like a natural point guard. Yeah. And Nikhil, like you said, he did more of that, I think, even in Utah than he did here. In his limited minutes there, but he's very capable, I think, of doing that type of thing.
It's just like turnovers with him
there. Yeah, exactly. And then you got Kyle, who obviously can, start any offensive thing, like he did last year. Whenever things were going badly, it's like, just give Kyle the ball. They have a lot of guys who can ball handle from that type of situation. I have no concerns about their point guard depth behind. And this is every team. If your starting point guard goes down, you probably don't have a great option like to be like, that guy can be our starting point guard behind him. It's like every team. It's like in the NFL with your quarterback. Like, oh, we lost our quarterback. Well, we're not going to be very good. It is what it is.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not worried at all. I agree with you. There are so many options to be the quote unquote ball handler behind Mike that you can just pick and choose depending on matchups or whatever, defensive matchups. Frankly.
Right. And maybe on Thursday and Saturday, we will have an idea of what of those options are Finch's favorite.
Right. There's a world where Shake and J-Mac don't play.
Yeah,
totally. Like there's a world where neither one of them plays if they don't deem it necessary.
Yep. Nope. I'm with that too. That's always, particularly at the beginning of the regular season, when I'm looking at it, it's like trying to figure out who's going to play for this team. And I think we'll see some of that. I don't think we'll see a lot of scheme stuff. Like normally with a Dallas matchup, I'd be like, ooh, like, is Rudy going to be up in coverage against Luka? But I think for both of these teams, they're going to be rolling out the basics of whatever it is they're going to do this season. I'm still looking forward to it. I like that it's a day game.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
I know. We're gonna knock it out. Like I will watch the game. Me and Kyle are gonna do a post game pod, and I'm gonna eat dinner and watch Thursday Night Football. It's gonna be great. It's like, well, we got to track our Bears.
That's right.
And Commanders prize.
And maybe
picks here.
maybe you'll have another Twins game there. You know, Like,
Yeah,
maybe you'll have another afternoon Twins game.
I got my twin stuff on.
You
right
got
now.
it today. Maybe you'll have one
going today.
tomorrow.
I'm
There
going.
you go.
I'm going to it this afternoon. So yeah, plenty of things. The people who are watching the Wolves in Abu Dhabi, while like if the Twins are playing and there's all this stuff,
They won't intersect though.
Oh, they won't. Okay.
No, because it's an 11 a.m. game, I think here.
Okay. Yeah.
And the Twins are at 3:30 again tomorrow if they lose today.
Need it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Just take off work.
Which takes you right into Thursday Night Football after the Twins game. Yeah, if you obviously fans want the Twins to win today, but if they lose, then it sets up an incredible sports day. If you just want to take the day off and go basketball, baseball, football.
Perfect. That's perfect. That's perfect. All right, he's Jace Frederick. Jace, appreciate you doing it. We're gonna have Jace on. Say every Wednesday. We're aiming at every Wednesday, as we are every Monday with Chris. Britt is a little all over the place, so it'll be like Tuesdays or Thursdays, Fridays with Kyle. But Jace, seriously, really excited to have you back on and start talking about this team this season. Appreciate you doing it.
I'm looking forward to it, man. Happy to get it going.
Yeah, until Thursday with Kyle, we're gonna do some sort of post game thing that'll be up sometime Thursday evening. Yeah, until then, he's Jace. Follow him on Twitter at Jace Frederick. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Until tomorrow, peace out.